What's up, everybody? This is Catholic Match Live. I think we're live at this point, even though I definitely have numbers still in front of my screen, but we're just going to go for it. My name's Isaac Huss, and today my guest is Adam Storey. Adam, how's it going?
Good. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Adam and I went to college together, actually. Adam is now in the Diocese of Des Moines, and we're going to tell a little bit more about him and his job and what he does, and our conversation. But maybe just a quick introduction into the series. Catholic Match Live is really just a conversation between at least semi-normal people. Spoiler alert: none of us are experts, but we're here to have a conversation with all of you to discuss this crazy world of dating. I am in the crazy world of dating myself. Adam has been out of the game for a while.
Yeah.
So take everything he says with a grain of salt. This is exactly how it was about 10 or 15 years ago. But no, seriously, Adam has actually been working with married couples. And so that's kind of going to be our topic today. We're going to be talking about dating and choosing a spouse and how to do that, how to choose a good spouse with a lasting holy marriage in mind. And I'll be talking about it and coming from still trying to figure that out myself. Adam's going to be coming from the other side. He's married himself. He has a beautiful, happy family, and he also works with married couples and families as a professional for the Diocese of Des Moines. And so I think he has a really good perspective. Again, starting from the standpoint of he's already there, he's already experiencing this, he's already seeing this with his own eyes, and I am not. So I'm going to be asking him for his advice on behalf of all of you. But you don't just have to take my word or his for it. We actually have an opportunity for all of you who are listening near and far and watching to submit your questions. So you see this big chat feature on the right side. That's an opportunity for all of y'all to communicate with each other. We'll see some of those comments, but truth be told, I'm more focused on seeing Adam's pretty face, making sure mine doesn't have any spit or anything all over it. We won't be able to see all of your comments. Maybe if it's really funny, we'll notice it. But if you have a specific question you want us answered, there's a specific question feature in the app here, and we'll be going to those specifically when it's time for some Q&A towards the end of our hour here, or 45 minutes or so. But we might be tapping into those as we go as well. So if you got a question, don't be shy. Throw it into that question feature, and hopefully we'll get that answered sooner rather than later. Okay, so without any further ado, we are going to talk. I'm going to name our topic again, and I'm going to give Adam a proper introduction here, and we're going to go from there. So today we're going to talk about on Catholic Match Live how to choose the right spouse that will lead to a happy and holy marriage. And Adam here, Adam Storey, leads the marriage and marriage ministry department for the Diocese of Des Moines, Iowa, which seeks to work with parishes and couples, walking with all families in all their stages and their joys and sorrows, their celebrations and challenges. Adam and his wife, Kara, and children live in Des Moines, which is approximately 4 hours from here, depending on how fast you drive. I usually can get within 3.5 hours, which scandalizes my mother, but I digress. Adam, why don't you just take a minute or two and fill in some of the blanks for our audience here? What was your childhood and family life like growing up? What was college like, or high school and college? And yeah, just catch us up to speed about how you ended up to be where you are now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and thanks for having me. So I live in Des Moines now. I grew up in Des Moines. I grew up in a Catholic family. I'm the second oldest of 9 kids. It was a big Catholic family. And I think I was blessed in a lot of ways with a happy, healthy childhood. Was well taken care of, a pretty normal childhood. Um, when I finished high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Didn't know where I was going to end up. My first option was I thought of the military, so I joined the Marine Corps and spent some time there, which was a good experience. Then there was a period of time where I thought maybe I'm called to be a priest, and I spent time in seminary. Eventually discerned that that's not where God was calling me to. Left seminary, met my wife. We've been married for 13 years. And, I think, yeah, so I have been out of the game for a little while, but, grew up and I think had generally pretty normal dating relationships, and actually was very blessed with, I think I wasn't really committed to discerning marriage well, but just kind of got lucky that I was around good people and had good relationships and grew up in a healthy way. So then at the time after discerning priesthood and meeting my wife, I was in a good place to be able to actually discern marriage well.
That's great. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. Maybe a little bit about this particular topic. You may have noticed this is a selfish endeavor to a certain extent for me, because I'm still trying to figure these things out myself. And you talk about being in a good place to discern marriage, and obviously I think starting from discerning your vocation first and foremost. That's actually the context in which Adam and I met. We were both studying to be priests, discerning that. I can say from my perspective, I was less committed to the priesthood than most, but I was certainly much more committed to the seminary than Adam, because I spent 4 years there. And Adam, I think, if I remember correctly, maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, I didn't make it that long. Yeah, it became apparent to everybody that I ought not stay. So
No, I think vocational discernment needs to be serious. It needs to be thorough, and it need not be very long if you do it right. So anyway, yeah, I think we can all say, and I'm seeing some of the questions that are coming in from our audience, finding a good partner, a good even just someone to date, much less somebody to marry, is easier said than done. And frankly, it's kind of wild to me, like how much freedom we get in this regard. Like even when I was discerning in the seminary, maybe you can speak to this, Adam, too. At a certain point, it's kind of like you're waiting kind of for God to give you this huge, bellowing voice from the sky. Isaac, you are not called to be a priest, but thank you for being here for 2 years. And that's what we were just waiting for you to get to that perfect moment. And then I was going to make it abundantly clear for you. Well, that's not how it goes. And at a certain point, you just kind of have to decide based upon all of your discerning that you've done so far, if you're going to keep going towards the priesthood. And ultimately, to me, there's even more freedom than when you actually step out and you start looking for a spouse. Because not only is it just simply yes or no to this vocation, but it's okay, there are literally billions of people in the world. And even nowadays, you're not going to meet all of them, but you can still come into contact with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or more in your lifetime, particularly with the internet. So to me, I mean, it's just like dramatically mind-blowing to a certain extent, like how much freedom God actually gives to us. So, I mean, was that your experience, Adam? I mean, or were you did you not suffer so existentially as some of the rest of us?
Yeah. Well, and I do want to say, I want to preface my comments a little bit with, you said the comment, it's easier said than done. And I think that's true. And my experience, even 15 years ago, from people's experience today is different. And so I want to acknowledge that and just kind of, honor that, I guess, with the real challenges that are there. But I would say, and this was, as I think about this, discerning who your spouse, who you're called to marry, and how to choose that spouse. I think, and this was a grace that I feel like was a part of my life, discerning our vocation in a context of trust
Yeah.
and peace, I think is really important, because what I notice in discernment is that sometimes there's an attitude of like, all right, there's three doors before me, three options before me. And door number one of these three doors is going to lead me to fulfillment and happiness and peace. And then the other two doors are just going to destroy my life. The other two doors are just going to be terrible.
That's really
And
bad odds, by the way.
what's that?
Bad odds.
Yeah, it's bad odds. And I've come to see it differently. And part of it is being a parent. Like, the image that I always use is when my kids get up and they're getting ready for breakfast, I tell them, listen, for breakfast, you can have oatmeal, you can have cereal, or I can fry you an egg. And then they choose. And the point is that all of these are good options. I don't put before them like, listen, you can have eggs, or you can have rat poison, or you can have engine oil. Choose wisely, And there are some objective choices we ought not make, right? There is the possibility of choosing rat poison, right? And we don't want to do that. But to discern in freedom and in trust that there's a lot of paths that bring us to fulfillment, and there's a lot of ways that God is going to work within the circumstances of your life to sanctify you and to draw you closer to Him. And so I do think that there's profound freedom. There is profound freedom, but it's the kind of freedom that I give my kids, where I'm trying, it's better than what I give my kids, but I'm trying to set them up for success. And even when they stray off the path, even when they mess up, even when they make bad choices, I sort of, as a dad, am trying to gently draw them back to a path that will be good for them. And I think that's how God treats us too. So the freedom can be overwhelming, but I think if we approach it with trust and know that there's different paths that will lead me to fulfillment, I think we can just have more peace about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I as I'm hearing you like say what sorts of options you could have given your children, or you could on any given morning. I don't think as a child I'd ever be like, well, Dad, why can't I have motor oil today? Or you're always giving me these foods that will actually taste good and nourish me. Like, why aren't you offering me something that would actually like poison me and help me to die sooner? Like, I think sometimes we get obsessed with choices and options that we don't realize, like, well, actually, like, we don't miss them as long. What we actually just want is them to be narrowed down to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Like, more options isn't necessarily better if they're just poorer options.
Yeah. Well, and that there is a sense, and I think there's probably research out there about this somewhere, but the sense of, with too many options, people become overwhelmed and people become incapable of making decisions.
And less satisfied with the decisions they make. I have read a couple of these sort of studies, and they're fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
Yeah. So okay, so then how did you let us in on the discernment process? And Kara, if you're listening, turn off your sound for a second here. But Adam, how did you decide that this woman in front of me is the one for me?
Yeah, well, Kara would say, if she was speaking, she would say that she was duped into a relationship with me, that it was through guile and deception that I got her to end up in a relationship with me. But I think it was a combination of so many things, things that I saw, things that were related to just the person Kara is, and the person she was, the person that she is, an attraction to her as a whole person. But it's also circumstantial things like, we're in the right state of life, that we had similar, we're both from the Midwest and we wanted to stay in the Midwest. We both had ideas about our future that was harmonious with each other. So it is this attraction to a person, this being captivated by her as a person, seeing these compatibilities that exist, and then just the circumstantial moment of it, and it was something that we grew into and we discerned over time. I was certainly ready to marry her before she was ready to marry me. But it wasn't like day one and I'm like, all right, let's go get married. It was day one was,
But day two.
yeah, no, yeah, it was 3 days. No, initially it was, I'm intrigued by this woman. There's something that I want to get to know about this woman. As I got to know her better, I become, more attracted to her. I become more desirous of sharing a life with her. And then I see that our values and everything match up, and it made a lot of good sense. And thank God she said yes.
Thank God. I thank God for that.
Yeah. There was many times in our discernment that in hindsight, I realized I was like right on the fence. She was ready to like let go of me. And I thought that our relationship is secure and we're ready to go. And she was just on the brink of breaking up with me at different stages in our discernment. But I weathered those storms. I made it through. So here we are.
No, it's funny you say that. I actually have learned this over time, that when I think relationships are fairly linear, and so you kind of get to the point where, okay, you're not worried that she's not going to want to go out with you on a second or third date. Like, so you sort of settle in like, okay, that this girl actually likes me, or at least likes spending enough time with me for that. And then, maybe you get to a point where you're officially girlfriend and boyfriend, and, things have been going really well. And yeah, I just kind of assume like, okay, let's just like keep it going and don't screw it up. And then eventually you'll live happily ever after. But I think from the women's perspective, it's like they're constantly reevaluating it. And to a certain extent, like the pressure is on us then to like continue to, prove our worth, obviously not screwed up. But yeah, kind of like, okay, I got to this stage, and now I need to sort of like push through to the next stage. And then there's literally millions of stages. Like I wish a woman would explain all this for us. We just didn't have to like figure it out on our own. But I want to go back to something that you said about how it kind of fit where you guys were at and both stayed in life, but also what you wanted for a relationship. I think a lot of people that I've noticed, whether they're Catholics or just kind of conservatives, friends of mine or people I find on Twitter or whatever, they have this sense of what they want, right? They have, okay, I want this sort of, traditional family. Dad is the breadwinner. Mom stays home. You have your 1.2 children, which translates for Catholics to be like 8.5, something like that. And you have your house, you have your picket fence, and all the rest. And some people even go much further. Like, I don't want a woman who wants to work out outside the home. Women will say, I really need a masculine man who needs to be A, B, or C height, or IQ level, or earning power, or whatever else. How important is it to have, an idea of what you want? How important is it that you match up with what you're looking for with someone that you want to eventually start a life with? And how much should you really be coming into a relationship with a certain level of, well, this is a human being. This isn't like an auto-generated, Catholic spouse that I can choose my own adventure for. And so how do you balance those two? Because obviously you want, we all have preferences and we all have things that we desire and we think are good things, but also this is a human being that that also has all those things on her own or his own, and they aren't going to necessarily all immediately match up, even with a really good match.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think virtue is found in the mean. So it's not like we ought to have standards and we ought to have expectations, and we should hold people to a particular standard. If the person that you're with is uh uh you know objectively not achieving the standards of just a good person, then it's probably not a path you want to go down. On
Yeah,
the
if
other
there are moral issues, that
Yeah,
those are legitimate red flags that should be universal to a certain extent.
yeah, absolutely. But then on the other side too, like, yeah, you can sort of like treat this as if it's like, my spouse is going to be some customized product that I buy on Amazon, and I pick the color and I pick and that's unhealthy too. And I think maybe the combination uh, uh, between either of those extremes is uh, I mean, it can be a bit egocentric, right? That it's all about like I'm discerning this, and it's all about what I'm going to get out of this person, or what I think this person ought to be, or is this person going to fulfill my needs, and all these sorts of things. And I think part of discernment in general, I think certainly a part of the Christian life is and part of fulfillment is to be drawn outside of ourselves a little bit, to forget about ourselves a little bit. I always think that to really be fulfilled in life, fulfillment can't be the thing that you're locked in focused on. If you're locked in focused and you're always asking like, am I fulfilled, am I happy, am I getting what I want, you probably aren't. uh, but if you change your focus, and if you say, I want to live a life of service, or I want to live a life of gratitude, uh, when you change the focus, you begin to find that fulfillment, I think, in more meaningful ways. Uh, and in our discernment in relationships too, it can't just be all about you know my subjective desires in this relationship, but uh, am I being drawn outside of myself, not in a way that I lose myself, but I really uh, uh, live my life well in this context.
Yeah, I don't know if this resonates with you, particularly on this subject, but I'm starting to learn more to just kind of, people say trust your gut, or trust, your instinct, or there's a term for the feminine genius, where there's an intuition that women should just trust. Um, I think a lot of these can kind of be vague terms. So one thing that I think I'm kind of coming around to is, do you want to do this thing? Like, are you sort of having to apologize to yourself for, you know, deciding to stay in instead of going out with your friends, or, buying that luxury item or not? A lot of the discernment just kind of comes down to like, you're weighing the positive and negatives. What do you want? So I think if you have somebody that you're dating, you have somebody, yeah, you find the profile online and you're like, wow, this person seems really great. And oh, also, uh, she's a nurse. Like the last woman that I dated was a nurse, and that was a really bad thing, you know. See, like, yeah, you could like just cross her off the list, but then just sit for a second and say, well, would you rather just at least give it a try? And I think with some of these things, um, if if you're weighing, well, this person doesn't fit exactly what I was looking for, but I really like this person, or I really care for this person, or this person seems to understand where I'm coming from in a way that other people that I've dated haven't. This person seems to, be responsive and communicate well. There's so many things I think that, you don't like lay in bed at night dreaming about a woman who communicates well, or, is quick to forgive, when you screw up. But those are the sorts of things that are kind of like, okay, I guess I didn't imagine dating somebody who would have a career outside of the home, or maybe I only wanted to have 2 or 4 children, but this person wants to have 7. That's a little outside of my comfort zone, but start with the person. Notice the person, learn, who they are, where they're coming from. And I think a lot of these sort of, um, you know, things that can kind of be nitpicky can kind of become less important. And I think the real problem that we get into, and this is part of the issue with online dating too, actually, I think, all things considered, is you see a photo of somebody and you see their vital signs, basically how tall they are, what they do for work, how many, like, literally CatholicMatch says how many kids do you want, which exact mass preference is yours, like that can literally distract from the fact that, yeah, this is an immortal soul, who has these preferences, as opposed to just, again, this sort of product,
Yeah,
that scrolling through.
I think that's well said, and I think that's true. And it's uh, we have to have more patience and more patience and more openness to the other person. To I do think that discernment can be derailed when we make just hasty judgments.
Yep.
No, you you can't you can't know anyone off of an online profile. You just cannot. Now, that doesn't mean that the online profile might not be a door into getting to know the person.
Yep.
But that's what it is. It's a door to the person. It's not the person themselves. And in dating, you can't get to know a person over a single date or 2 dates or 3 dates. Uh, to be patient with that, to really get to know the person, I think that is certainly important in that process of discernment, and uh, just entering into a relationship with somebody. Take the time to get to know them. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I am, anybody who's watched my videos so far or read anything that I've written knows that I'm a proponent of just get on a date. I'm all for, like, okay, getting to know somebody in messages or whatever, you want to talk on the phone, if you want to do a FaceTime, fine. Just get out in public with this person, see what they're actually like as a human being. The profiles are great because they let us, to a certain extent, filter through, like, okay, this person lives a little too far away than I would prefer. Or this person, is not in a reasonable age range for me. There's a question here, actually, which I'll take this opportunity to say. What is a reasonable age difference? I'm probably a bit more liberal than most when it comes to this sort of thing, in part because I have an aunt and uncle who are married now for 60 years, and he's 13 or 14 years older than she is. She was like 23, he was like 36, 37, something like that. So I've always kind of had that, like, well, that seems extreme, but I mean, it worked for them, so who's to say? But yeah, I think, you meet somebody who's sometimes 10 years younger than you, and you feel like you wouldn't have ever guessed that. It's like the maturity level is the same, the communication level is great. And then sometimes you meet somebody who's 2 years younger than you, and you're like, wow, I cannot relate to you. You're saying weird terms. You're like saying out loud the abbreviations, like, what are you doing, RN? Uh, and that's, yeah, I just can't relate to that. So yeah, I don't know if it's so much the age. I mean, obviously, none of us should be dating anybody who's under the age of 18. I think that's a fair line to draw. I also think there are stages in life. So, if you're graduated from high school and you're going to college, or you've got a full-time job, like, it could be you're literally the same age in date of birth, but you are now in a different stage of life. And this is why a lot of people say, like, yeah, break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend when you if you're one's going to be in college, one's be in high school, because it's a totally different life, in some ways. Same thing with graduated from college. So, like, high school, college, out of college. After you've kind of done life by yourself for a year or two, after that, you kind of enter into self sufficiency for real. And to me, like, at that point, we're all adults here. Like, you can decide on your own in terms of what's an appropriate age difference. But I would say, like, yeah, um,
That makes sense. I agree with what you're saying about maturity is, I think, a more important qualification than the particular age. And I think, and we, in getting ready for this show, that we're talking some comments about the idea of getting married old, getting married young, uh, and I think I know people who are. I know a man who is preparing for marriage and is 18, but has great maturity, and I think he's going to be okay. And I also know people who are in their 40s who I don't think are yet mature enough to get married. And so, it's not necessarily the age; it's the character that a person has that I think makes more difference.
yeah, yeah, I think that's great. All right, so one of the things that I think is of particular is particularly on my mind, is the importance of attraction. Okay, so pragmatically, you can list all the things, like you want somebody who's kind, you want someone who's thoughtful, you want someone who communicates well, etc. You want somebody who lines up with the things that you care about, that you believe, etc. And also, we do put photos on our profiles in part because we want to know what other people look like. We want people to know what we look like. We don't, you don't want to show up on a date and somebody like, oh, well, nice meeting you. The visual things matter. And I always say, like, oh, you can't put too much stock in the photos on the online dating. Well, you would never approach somebody at the bar, unless unless you liked what they looked like. You're not going to know anything about this person before you actually approach them, other than what, if you are physically attracted to them. So there's something that's just kind of basic about physical attraction when it comes to romance. But also there's something fairly necessary about it. You shouldn't be unattracted to your spouse, at least at the very beginning. And I would say, if all goes well throughout the entirety of your relationship. So, Adam, in your personal in your personal opinion, but also just in terms of the fact that you've been working with married couples, um, before, during, and after they get married and they've been together for a long time, and when you contextualize, like, how successful are these couples, like, how much should we, um, as single people, but also as Catholic single people, what should be the proper importance that we place upon how attractive this person is?
Yeah. So I got two thoughts in my head, I guess, about this. One is um, that physical, visual attraction to another person is, or that part of attraction. It is a part of attraction. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not. Um, it's not everything that goes into being attracted to someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so while it's a part of it, it's only a part of it. And I do think sometimes it can be overemphasized. And this is a little bit of getting to know the whole person, because you should be attracted to the whole person. You shouldn't be attracted to their body. You shouldn't be attracted to exclusively their body or exclusively how they look. You should be attracted to the whole person. So my wife, who's objectively beautiful, but on our at the end of our first date, I was attracted to her, and I was attracted to her. In particular, it stood out to me, her wit and her ability to argue with me and just go back and forth, and kind of put me on my heels in our conversation. And man, that was a really attractive quality. And she's beautiful, but that's a part of what draws that to the surface. The way that we interact. And for all of us, like, you're again attracted to the whole person, and I think that matters. The second thing I want to say too is in our culture, which we all swim in, it's the waters that we're in. Uh, if we have seen television, if we've seen movies, certainly if we've been exposed to pornography, we have unreal images of what physical beauty looks like. You know, we have distorted images of physical beauty that really mess. You know, it takes time to heal from that, and it's
Yeah.
important to heal from that because that can be really disruptive to a person's ability to enter into uh, ability to understand another person's beauty and an ability to understand their own beauty. You know, it distorts our image of ourselves too.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that has to be wrestled with and that has to be dealt with. Uh, and yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle that matters, but it's not the whole puzzle.
Yeah, I definitely I think there's some well, yeah, I'm just gonna out myself. I think I put too much emphasis on physical attraction, but I also know that the women that I've been most attractive to, um, it's so much our interactions, our the jokes that I can make with her, and how she can sort of push back on my BS. And so I laugh when you say, "Yeah, she can argue with me." Like I need a woman who can argue with me
Yeah.
because I am going to be convinced that I'm right all the time, and maybe I will never be convinced that I'm not right. But I need someone to be suspicious of that and to hold her own, you know, and all those things. Like especially when you get to know somebody. I still remember my first high school like crush that actually like lingered into adulthood. Like every now and again you kind of joke about this person and oh yeah, was she like super attractive? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean she was attractive, but it hardly mattered anymore what she looked like. Like it was, it was the whole person. And sometimes you literally, I've been this like even my like long relationship that I've been in, and even like you think about your like family members, like could you describe what they look like at a certain point? It's like, well, no, they're just. It's like the way they look is so bound up in who they are that honestly, like the external is so much just kind of like your first impression, and who cares? You're not marrying the first impression. You're marrying for life, and that's this is the whole point. Is that you can you need to be a certain level of attracted on the front end, but you should really be contextualizing all of this with: are you going to want to be with this person when you're 55? Are you going to want to be with this person when you're 45 and you're exhausted and you have a knee surgery and you've gained 30 pounds, and do they still care for you in the same way they would if you were on your feet and all the rest?
Yeah, I think if you have a healthy disposition towards this, the attraction and even the physical attraction, it grows as your relationship grows and as you get to know the person more deeply. So, you know, my wife and I have been married for 13 years, and my attraction to my wife continues to grow. And it's not
Oh, that's
because,
great.
yeah, and it's not because Kara is like, you know, committed to new fitness programs or something like that. We're getting older, uh, and she's gone through a lot. She's had 6 kids at this point, right? Like, uh, we are getting older, and our bodies are beginning to fail. Like that's what happens as you get older.
Mine
Uh,
too.
but the
Yeah.
attraction, yeah, but the attraction grows because we've seen each other on a deeper level. You know, we've become vulnerable with each other. We've suffered with each other. So I don't think it's something that we have to worry about losing that if we approach it with the right attitude from the beginning. You know?
Yep. And I think, yeah, I think even just from a practical standpoint, like a lot of this is kind of we have to go through, we have to do some introspection. If we find ourselves that we're relying too much on the physical attraction, and I've had to like do some soul searching, like why do I care about that? It has a lot to do with pride. It has a lot to do with kind of vainglory and even a sort of narcissism to a certain extent. Um, but let's just put all that all aside for a second. Like, yeah, it's probably a you issue if that's what you're going through, and me too. But let's just put that aside for a second. Practically speaking, if it's just a matter of, like, again, do you want this bad enough? If you want to get married to somebody, you have to actually find somebody that you want to marry yourself, and that person has to want to marry you. And in order to get there, you actually have to, like, go on a date. So you can decide in your mind, I will only date a person who is, a perfect 10, and who has all the fitness programs in the world, and is this tall, or this shade of hair, or is capable of this beard, or is perfect skin, or whatever else. You can decide all that all you want. But if you're not actually going on any dates because those people don't actually want to go on any dates with you, like, practically speaking, you're going to have to change your standards. So I think, generally speaking, if you are not going on a date a month, even one date every month, I'm convinced you actually don't want to get married, or at least you don't want to get married anytime soon.
So I might push on that a little bit in two ways. One, I do think that people have to have certain dispositions of an openness to discernment, but I also don't want to overemphasize the agency of a particular person. Like, you have to be willing to go on dates. You have to be open to putting yourself out there, but you're not entirely in control of the circumstances, and you
Yeah.
won't be entirely in control of the circumstances. So, because I don't want to give an impression that if a person isn't married, they chose not to be or something.
Yeah,
And the
fair
other
enough.
thing that I would say, and I was having a conversation with a friend about this, do you think it's the case? And I'm maybe uh, coming around to this being an impression that I have, that for women, they can tend to lower their standards and accept guys who maybe uh, ought not be accepted. Just objectively, the guy ought not be accepted.
Are you
Uh,
talking visually now, or
what's that?
virtuously? Are we talking visually ought not be accepted, or
Well,
virtually
I think,
virtuous?
when you said the standard, I think it seems to me like maybe the dating pool is harder for women, and you know, sometimes they get pressured to lower a standard, not uh, necessarily visually. I think the visual pieces tend to matter more towards men, tend to matter more for men than women. But guys maybe have the, I want to find the perfect 10. I want to find the woman that checks every box for me, and maybe they need to be taught to be a bit more reasonable or something like that. But for some women, don't accept a turd. Don't accept a turd. Uh, I don't know, but maybe I'm wrong about this. But
All right. Well, I'm definitely, like, going from my own male perspective. How often do you think a single man who is starting from scratch and definitely wants to get married soon enough, reasonably soon, how often should they be going on a date?
well, that I
They
think that
they don't live in Antarctica. There'll be separate rules if you live in some
yeah,
remote
I think
locale.
it's I think
You live at least close enough to a metropolitan area that you could date somebody there.
I think that they should be actively putting themselves out there, actively trying to find opportunities to meet people, to put them in positions where they can meet people, and that they could find somebody to discern marriage with. I think that's true for men and for women. I think that that's not a bad disposition.
So how often should they be going
Oh,
on?
geez, I don't know. It's been a while since.
Well, and here's why I'm pushing this, because I do think, like, again, you can kind of have all these like you can have all these theoretical things like, oh yeah, I want a woman who is A B C D and E and F, and I'm not going to settle on anybody, and you could then 20 years later find out, well, maybe that was unrealistic. So at what point are you like, okay, those types of women aren't going on dates with me, and maybe I should change my standards?
But
And again, not like moral standards or
yeah,
anything,
yeah, I
but
get.
we're talking like if you're just eliminating people because I'm not attractive enough in this person, or this person's not impressive enough to me. Like, at what point are you like, no, you should actually just go out with somebody?
So I would say, and maybe this is a little bit of the agency, that it's not always the case that a person can just decide to go on a date. You have to find somebody who's willing to go on a date. But I think you should be regularly putting yourself in social situations where you might have that opportunity to, and then I mean, particularly from the man's perspective, and that's the only perspective that I have experience with. You should be willing to ask people out,
Yeah, yeah,
to say, hey, will you go out with me?
yeah,
Can I take you to dinner or whatever it is? Um, yeah, I think you should put yourself out there. Now, you might hear no a lot, and that's okay. If
yeah,
yeah, you should be okay with that. But yeah, I think you should put yourself out there. And I do think, kind of a general thing that we kind of talked about earlier, not to be overly hasty to just make decisions about, oh, this is going to work, this is not going to work. To give it time to develop. I think that matters too.
yeah. I also, yeah, and maybe I'm sticking to my guns, but I will hedge my bet a little bit here and say, I think even if the people that you're asking out aren't going out with you, if somebody asks you out, you should be generally happy to do it, even if it's just for coffee. I
Yeah,
think the vast majority of people, um, who were to say, "Hey, let's go get coffee, or lunch, or happy hour, or whatever," um, I think the proper disposition is, yeah, let's do that. You don't have to commit to longer than 45 minutes to an hour. You might already figure out within 15 minutes, yeah, this is never going to lead to another date. Um, but yeah, I'm just a huge proponent of, you know the people that are in front of you, and not just this theoretical, perfect match, that I've created in my mind. Discern the people in front of you, basically.
yeah, yeah. I think that's wise.
And frankly, that's why I actually think CatholicMatch and the online dating sites are really good, for all sorts of reasons. But I think, if nothing else, you should be investing in your local community, the people that go to your church, the people, like, you see someone at the grocery store or at yoga or whatever regularly, maybe you ask that person out. And then you can also, like, balance that with, other people that you see on the dating apps, maybe even out of town, which is a perfect segue to my next question for you, Adam. You didn't live in the same city as your now wife at all the entire time you were dating, is that right?
Yeah. So we didn't. Well, we lived in the same city for, I think, the 2 months before we got married. So our whole dating, most of our engagement, uh, we lived usually about 3 hours apart from each other. Then
Uh,
eventually 2 hours apart from each other.
and how was that experience for you? Would you recommend it? Would you say, no, don't ever do that? What advice would you give to people considering a long distance relationship?
Um, I mean, in some ways, kind of, I think, goes back to what you said earlier about kind of trusting your gut a little bit. Like, I knew I wanted to date my wife, and I knew she didn't live in the city that I was in, so I didn't have a lot of options. You know, and
Guess we're
and
gonna do a long distance relationship.
Yeah, exactly. I was okay with it because of who she was and because I wanted to pursue her. Um, I think I think that there were certain things that really like strengthened our relationship because of that distance. But there were other things that definitely were harder because of it. And maybe it's trusting your gut. And I think adversity, like in marriage, you're going to have adversity, and so you're going to have adversity in your dating, in your engagement, and those things can draw you closer together, or they can put a wedge between you. And uh, it's not necessarily the circumstances, but I guess it's how you live those out that matter.
Great. Um, all right. Well, we are nearing the end of our time here, but I do want to get to some of these questions here. Um, Marie, believe it or not, I had already planned to talk about the attraction thing in discernment, and you literally spell that out perfectly. So it's good to know that that's something that's on your mind, and I'm sure it's on other people's minds. So glad that we're speaking to that. Uh, was there a okay? So Firas has a good question here, and we kind of talked about this, Adam, earlier, but you know, there was a yeah, maybe this is another way of saying it. Like we asked, how did you know that this is the one? How did you know that you want? I thought you answered pretty well. How did you know that you wanted to spend the rest of your life with Kira? But was there a point where you kind of knew, okay, this is actually happening? Like, was there a point where it's like, practically speaking, like, oh, this, I think this is the thing.
Yeah, I think. Well, I would say I can't identify like a particular moment where it just clicked for me. Like I think from the beginning when we were dating, we both knew that this was our intention, was to discern this and to kind of see if this is the right path. And
Yeah.
uh, things kept fitting together. Things kept progressing well, and um, so I mean, at a certain point, like I almost think of like a seesaw or something where at a certain point the weight just tips and you say, okay, like, yeah, this is what I want to
There's
do.
no going back.
Yeah, yeah. And I think once we kind of figured that out, yeah, we were in it. We were like, yeah, this is what we want to do. Not that uh it couldn't have changed, but our disposition changed to now like now we're preparing for marriage. We're not just discerning it, but we're getting ready to get married. Um
Yeah,
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 but it was
interesting.
over time.
I have not been married before, but I was engaged to be married, and I can kind of relate to that a little bit. Where I we had broken up twice already, and that's a whole nother story about why that happened. But after we got back together the second time, it was kind of like, well, this means we're gonna have to get married. Like we can't just like keep doing this whole thing, like on and off again. So it's kind of like, in order for her to even like take me back, it kind of had to be like, okay, is this going to be like a permanent thing? And I remember specifically thinking, like, even before I like even asked her back, I was kind of like, if I'm going to ask her back, I got to be serious about this. And I had all sorts of like, you know, feelings of hesitation and fear and whatever. And I will say, like, they weren't totally gone once I went through that process, and then when I proposed to her and everything. But I do think that there's something about a fear to commit that keeps us from committing,
Yeah.
or at the very least tends to like sort of legitimize concerns or like heighten concerns in a way that maybe they wouldn't otherwise. So there was something about the commitment, like actually buying a ring worth thousands of dollars and putting it on her finger and hearing her say, like, yeah, I want to get married to you too. Like some of those concerns, like, it's not like I just looked at it with rose colored glasses all of a sudden, but it was like, no, that they're not as important. They're not as scary. That the getting over the commitment part in some ways was a hurdle that was necessary to really be confident in this relationship. So I think yeah, at a certain point, like, and I think in frankly, when I was discerning the priesthood too, there was a certain point where like maybe I should try to lean in further, make a
Yeah.
certain level of commitment so that I can kind of try this on, and also yeah, see if I have peace with it, and I think that can really help.
Yeah. No, absolutely it can. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, how about a lightning round here? Um, and I'm going to toss this one to you. Is it appropriate to date soon after a breakup? And if not, how much time would you recommend? So yeah, maybe just generally speaking, how soon would you recommend getting back into the game?
I think as soon as you are confident that you're not dating somebody in order to cover up pain from the previous relationship, if your heart's in a strong enough place where this isn't about treating previous pain, this is about exploring a new relationship, then I think it's good. I mean, it depends on how intense the previous relationship was.
Yep.
I don't think I can give a particular date though, unfortunately. I'm dodging the question, but that's what I
No,
think.
no, I think that's it. And because it's an open-ended question, you kind of have to give an open-ended answer. But yeah, my sense would be, I think I think there can be something scandalous about just like hopping back into the game, if you will. Like, oh, don't you care about this person? But I think theoretically, like if you have properly, worked through all those things, um, and yeah, I think it can happen sooner than maybe seems obvious, but yeah, it's really, with a lot of things in life, what are your intentions in doing it, and what are your where your where your heart is, so to speak. I actually hate saying that, but I'm gonna just stick with it. Is it wrong to date two people? I know I must eventually choose between the two. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. Eventually, you'd
I
have to choose between the two.
yeah, I don't think you should date two people at the same time. No.
I'm going to say I actually think it is good to casually date, and if that means, this isn't a modern thing. Like, used to be in the '70s or whatever. You'd go to the football game, you'd go on it, you'd have a date to the football game. Then you might have another date to whatever barbecue or bonfire on Saturday night. I think that can be very healthy. Um, but but again, if you're like sneaking around to avoid like one other person finding out, that might actually mean that you should actually decide at that point. Like, there's a Seinfeld episode where George is saying something about whatever woman's in his life, and Jerry says, "Are you like officially dating this person?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know." And he's like, "Well, is she expecting to see you on Saturday night?" And if it's like, "Well, yeah, she is actually," and then, well, you might be in a relationship at that point. And then if you felt like you had to sneak around, like, oh, I need to like, somehow get out of my usual Saturday night with this woman to be with, yeah, I mean, at a certain point, we're talking about deception, and you don't want to be playing with people's emotions and their expectations in that regard. All right. Adam, I'm going to toss it to you. Do you have any last words you'd like to share with our audience? Any specific words of wisdom or perhaps encouragement you'd like to offer to people who are single, wondering what their next move is, maybe struggling to decide who to pursue and how? Last words.
Well, I think I want to go back to that discernment of your vocation with peace and with trust, and God has great plans for all of us, and in any particular circumstance that we're in. So acknowledging that, yeah, there can be, you know, real challenges and real difficulties in all of this, but I hope that people have peace and have hope and have freedom in that discernment.
Amen. And I would just like to say, I would encourage all of you who are listening and watching this tonight and in the future to do what I did today, which is talk to a married person about these very same things, whether it's a man or a woman. Figure it out. Even if it's a couple, take them out to dinner. Ask. I like to ask married people to have me over for dinner because they already have to cook. Just cook an extra meat, one extra serving. But the idea is that get the perspective of someone who's been there and done that, whether they're married 2 years, whether they're married 12 or however long, 22, 32. And yeah, just pick their brain. Adam, I've really appreciated this conversation in general, but I appreciated particularly your perspective as a father and to be able to say like, and this has been kind of my prayer recently is God as Father. He loves us, and he didn't like set up like this video game where he's just like, oh, I'm gonna make it really hard for them to find a spouse that they can really trust and who's sufficiently spiritual enough. Like, no, our Father in heaven loves us, and he has created us for love, to love him and to love each other. And God willing that we're in a relationship, a lifelong loving relationship. So thank you, Adam, for being on today and sharing that, and for the life that you live, and your relationship with Kara, and your relationship with God, and with your children.
Thanks for having me.
Thank all of you for watching and for listening. We do this once a month. These live interviews. I saw somebody in the questions say, "Can we get a woman on here? Because I'm a woman and I want the female perspective." Yes, you're in luck. I believe our guest next month will be a woman. Our guest last month was a woman too, Arlene, and we have that video on YouTube as well. And every month I also will do recorded videos, both on YouTube and Instagram. So check those out. And hopefully we won't need to see you every time, because you're going to find somebody you love and get married, and you won't need to tune in to Catholic Match Live. But if we do see you next time, I'll be happy to see you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll all see you next time. God bless.